something that Trevor said to the FCC directly. And so I encourage all of you to go to this page. It's ourtownourchoice.org/FCC. And this, in my opinion, is one of the top comments that the FCC has ever received. And I received this on June 17th, 2020. And Trevor Marshall took the time, days, to write this and get it as simple and as clear as possible to try to get through to these FCC folks. So Trevor, why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about what's important in what you shared. I'm just going to hit a few highlights here visually, but why don't you start talking about this?
Yeah, okay, Paul. Well, basically, the FCC put out the request for comment on their revised quote-unquote safety dicta for RF radiation. And they put out the recommendations, I think, in November, and eventually got through to, with all the delays, got through to 17th of June as being the deadline for comments. And the problem is that they made so many mistakes in their own document, and the whole thing was so crazy that I thought what I would do was write to them, showing them how the whole thing was crazy, where they'd made the errors, and what they needed to do to move forward from here. The problem, there are a number of problems that we have that they don't understand yet. And the first is that the 4G build-out has already been too dense. Here in this city, in Thousand Oaks, we have a number of residents who have applied with doctor's certificates from to the city council, telling the city council that they will be asking for special ADA dispensation when and if any build out occurs in their specific areas, their specific parts of town, because they're already being made sick by the 4G. And right at the moment, the densification involves a number of new bands that were auctioned off last year, late last year. And the towers are being adapted to put in all these new bands. So you're looking at one antenna now, and one antenna might be radiating 12 different signals. Plus 4G itself involves multiple signals radiating at once, which we didn't have before with 3G and 2G, not in the same way. And because they're using pulsed radiation in the case of 4G, for some reason the engineers think that that's somehow safer, and they're putting the power up even higher over what they had before. The Reciprocity Theorem. And what that rule says that if you have a transmitter and a receiver, and you send a signal from the transmitter to the receiver, then it's exactly the same. You can change that round and move the transmitter and the receiver to different ends of the path, whatever is in between them. And you'll get exactly the same signal. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's reciprocity. You can exchange the transmitter and receiver. Now, why that's so important to us is that the ultimate target for these cellular phone waves, these cellular waves, is a phone. And the phone that we hold in our hands is transmitting, and that signal has to be strong enough to be heard by the tower. And the tower is listening for the signal from the phone, which is typically very low, somewhere around 5 watts of power is what the cell phone is putting out. So really, the amount of power that the tower needs to put out is the same as the phone, 5 watts or so. But still, you've got no justification whatsoever for the thousands of watts that are being radiated from the average 4G tower these days. tens of thousands of watts, actually, for most of them. It's crazy. There's no engineering justification, and there's certainly no health justification. So I started off by reminding them that as engineers, they should know that. Now, how do I know they're engineers? Because anything they said about biology was ridiculous, and that it was quite clear that physicians had not been involved in drafting the regulations. And I said, that's crazy. You know, the law says that only physicians are allowed to say whether something's safe and unsafe. And yet you've produced a complete document which clearly has not been drafted by physicians, but by engineers. And one of the things that the engineers did in the new regulations that came out, they tried to make fun of something called the Bio-Initiative. Now, the Bio-Initiative was started by Cindy Sage back years ago, and a group of physicians, including Carpenter and a whole group of physicians. And what they did was go through the medical literature from a biology point of view and pick out all the studies that related to how strong a signal could be, how much it was needed to affect the body, and try and figure out what the lowest unsafe level was. In other words, when a study says that there was an effect, that's bad, that's unsafe. We don't want these signals to be affecting our health in any way, or our body's performance in any way. So they identified the lowest unsafe signal level amongst all these studies. And that was set then as the Bio-Initiative level, the Bio-Initiative unsafe level.
If you look at number 1, 5 bars on the cell phone, and then you look over here to how much microwatts per square meter it is, it's actually very, very low. You're used to these guidelines being somewhere between 1 and 10 might be okay, but 0.002 microwatts per square meter will give you 5 bars on a cell phone. And then what this does is it takes all of the things from the RF bar charts and these studies, which are close to 4,000 or 5,000 of them, that are part of the Bio-Initiative report. And it just lists out for you on this page exactly what's happening at each of these levels. And the crazy thing is how much higher the guideline is versus what we need. And that's the key point of what you said, Trevor, in your piece. We'll go back to it.
If you have a look at page at line 2 and line 3, 5 bars on a cell phone, and then at line 3 is 15,000 times higher than that is where sleep disorders, weakness, fatigue, and pain in a group of teenagers was found by, well, I'll show you in a little while where it is, but that's a study which was the lowest one. Then human sensation, different study using different methodology, needed a little bit more signal. But by the time you get to 10 times that, to 50,000 times 5 bars on a cell phone, you're getting decreased cell growth, childhood leukemia, you know, the types of really bad things that you don't want to be happening.
So let's take a look at 1,000, 2,000, 2,500. I see a lot of homes that have this right now. And what's happening? This is childhood leukemia, impaired motor function, memory, attention, altered white blood cells. This affects your immunity. So all of this is just disastrous. And it's happening well below the guideline, which is up there around 5 billion times higher than 5 bars on a cell phone. And so our whole point is that what we need to do is compare back to what is needed to get the job done, as opposed to how high can I possibly go.
As I said, the Lorentz Reciprocity Theorem says that 5 watts is all you need to get the job done. Yeah, maybe we'll let you have 50, but 50,000, you've got to be kidding. There's no justification whatsoever for the engineering design of the towers as they are currently deployed in our communities.
Well, that's particularly important when you take a look at what is the actual purpose of the Telecommunications Act from 1934 and also in 1996. Trevor also pulled out those things and added that to his comment right down at the bottom. I'm just going to highlight that for you so you can make sure you can see it. I'm going to go back to it. And so we're going to see that this is taken straight out of the law. This is the 1934 Telecommunications Act. And it says, hey, we're going to create an FCC for a particular purpose. The purpose is to regulate interstate and foreign commerce by wire, radio. Got it. For what? National defense. And, oh, yes, this red one. The purposes of promoting safety of life and property. Look, they made this statement early on in 34, and you think maybe they walked away from it? Well, it's not true. In 1996, they amended the Act for mobile services, and number one, factors which the Commission must consider: promote the safety of life and property. So anything the FCC is doing that isn't promoting the safety of life and property is not consistent with the purpose of the law, the 1996 Telecommunications Act.
What the FCC said about the bioinitiative study was that the bioinitiative study was crazy because the level that the bioinitiative study had determined to be unsafe was millions or billions of times lower than they're currently using. That was their first point. They said that, not me. I reminded them. Millions or billions of times, and that there was no way that any tower that was using such low powers could possibly implement a communication system. And that's not true. The Lorentz Reciprocity Theorem says it's not true. If they did tests at lower power levels in the cities, they would find out themselves it's not true. They don't need the power that they're transmitting. And so therefore the whole exercise that the FCC is going through is pointless, because they're trying to figure out what's going to make a human dysfunction instead of what do we need to get the job done. Because at the moment there is 100,000, 1 million times difference in power between those two objectives. So therefore it's particularly interesting that the Telecommunications Act specifically empowered local authorities to become involved in the operation of these cell sites. Cities have the power to regulate the operation of wireless communications facilities. It was specifically left in there by Congress. There were two very important decisions that came down from the DC Circuit of Court Ketowa. The
Ketowa, the Cherokee Nation. It was tribes out in, obviously, Native American lands, but there was an intervener named Edward B. Myers from Maryland. And the beautiful part about his intervener brief, meaning he added himself to the case without being really asked, is the judges recognized his case. And so they used it in their ruling, which meant this didn't just apply to the tribes. This applied to the entire country. And we got that admitted by Verizon's outside counsel in San Francisco. He admitted it right there on the record that, of course, this does apply to the entire country. So you hear this little excuse, oh, that happened to the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, which is Washington, D.C. It doesn't apply to us in California, which is the Ninth Circuit. That's a bunch of bunk. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals job is to review acts of agencies and things and Congress, and whatever they do say is just one rung below the Supreme Court. It applies to the entire country.
And what the DC Circuit Court of Appeals did was strike down the 5G, the exemption that had been granted from the NEPA, National Environmental Protection Authority, requirements for 5G towers. And that effectively meant that there was no way that these forests of 5G towers could be deployed outside our driveways. That was struck down. The FCC was dragged kicking and screaming to actually withdraw a key part of their regulations in December. But the industry just keeps on applying pressure and threats to the cities, and the cities are hiring consultants. They're lying. Either that, or they don't know how to read circuit court decisions, appeals circuit court.
Hey, what's really important about that decision that everybody should pay attention to is that that was the first of the orders that came out talking about small cells. If you see what they did in 2018 and 19 is they put out a bunch of orders that were all interlocking. And so one depended on the other. And you could tell because they had the same docket number that was referenced across all these orders. So they're all tied together. And so the very first foundational block was, hey, there's no need for environmental review, and therefore we can move much faster because there's no need for environmental review. Got it? All right, we're going to start off and say, hey, small cells are different from everything else. And we have a special definition for them. And now we're going to say that there's no need for us to go through our rule process and figure out how to do Nepa and that stuff. Hey, it's no big deal. It's like a Wi-Fi router. It's just, hey, don't worry, right? Well, what they didn't count on was that the judges not only took away their environmental exemption, they also wiped out the definition. The definition of small cells was also vacated in the order. Yeah. Now, look, this is very important. Let me tell you why. When you actually have a new class of wires facilities, you have to go through certain steps in order to establish it. And what they did the first time was correct. They put out an NPRM, which is a notice for proposed rulemaking, and they said, give us comments, we'll build a record, we'll look at that, and we'll eventually, make the order and we'll vote it through. That's the proper way to go about doing it, okay? Well, if they did that and the whole thing got vacated, they're gonna have to come back and do it again. Well, guess what? They didn't. What they tried to do was they tried to stick it in sideways without doing any of the special process. What? Yes. This is a fatal error made by the FCC. And so now they are trying to fool everybody into thinking that the definition still exists. It does not. And so all of those little Christmas tree ornaments they try to hang on to the benefit of a small cell has no foundation. Hey, what's one of those? Yeah,
but you see, our city council has even been told by their consultant, so-called expert, that Nepa doesn't apply to any cell, which is absolutely wrong. Every cell has to go through the Nepa process, every cell. And we have actually lodged objections over several cells with FCC, and FCC is going through them at the moment. With one of them, they've got to the stage of actually getting comments back from, or getting testimony back from Verizon. And it's very likely, it looks very likely they're going to throw that one out as not being NEPA compliant.
So here's, I'm going to tell you my experience, okay? We talked to the FCC attorneys for NEPA on December 12th of 2019. We got them to explain the whole process to us. We carried through and we made 5 complaints on the different projects, testing different things, large macro towers and small cells and others. Every single one has been stuck at the FCC. None of these are getting built. Hey, there's a whole lawsuit being held up by this. We have asked the FCC to just give us their determination whether or not an environmental assessment is needed. You would think this might move. What we have found out is that I think this definitional problem has them in a box. They don't have the authority to act any longer because they wrote back in their response brief that they repealed their authority over environmental matters with respect to small cells. They wrote it. That wasn't vacated. That stands today.
Oh. Well, and they also tried to shift the safety issues over to the CDC and FDA, and that failed. The FDA in February came back with a report on cancer caused by RF radiation, where the FDA said in their conclusions that more attention needed to be paid to people who were especially sensitive to the radiation, that there appeared to be a class of people that were especially sensitive to radiation levels, and that more attention needed to be paid to this in rulemaking by FCC. That's in the FDA document, which is the latest document that has been issued on the safety issue right now. So, I mean, FCC should not be building any towers at all right now. the industry should not be building any. And I'm glad to see that they're starting to backpedal now. When they're challenged, they're tending to back away a lot more frequently these days than they were last year.
And let me give you some evidence of that. Just today, we got confirmation that there was applications by Crown Council in San Rafael, California, 5 of them, and they were proposed for residential areas. And all 5 were denied by the planning department. And Crown Castle came back literally an hour and a half ago and said, we're not going to appeal.
Yeah, they've got no basis. The problem, there's an even bigger problem for them, if you can imagine that. Paul mentioned Mozilla versus FCC. Now, nobody's paid any attention to this, and the industry's been very careful to downplay that decision. It came from the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. And what happened was FCC changed the way that they wanted to regulate data being sent over cell phone links. They changed the way that they wanted to regulate data. And the DC Circuit Court of Appeals said, great, yes, okay, we'll let you do that. And that's all the industry said. Oh, we won, we win. No, you didn't win. Because what the DC Circuit Court of Appeals went on to do was then look at the authority of the FCC under the Act. And what they said was, there doesn't appear to be any override of local jurisdiction, state and council jurisdiction, that under the new rules, there doesn't seem to be any justification for FCC to claim an override anymore.
And when you mean override, you mean preemption, right? That's
preemption,
the
yeah.
use.
So they can't tell the councils what to do. All of this, our hands are tied rubbish that's coming from the council right now is absolutely false. Their hands are not tied. They were untied late last year. We're talking about data, and you're trying to enforce data on these cities. And yet the actual 1996 Act only applies to telephone communications, to voice. You might have some preemption capability with respect to voice coverage, but you have absolutely no preemption as regards to data. So if you're saying you want to put more movies and data coverage out into the cities, yeah, okay, if the cities want them, that's fine. But if they don't want them, you can't preempt them. It's on page 146 of the Mozilla versus FCC decision. And we're starting to hear, particularly from Campanelli, that he's having a lot of success, that if he just asks for the call records whenever he's appealing any of these tower applications, that the telcos are starting to back off and realize that they're beaten.
All right, let me just highlight this page because those 20 pages you were talking about are reproduced on this page. This is Judge Millett's portion of her order that I've put on this page, along with the key 24 minutes by Stephen Wu. He is the Deputy Attorney General for the state of New York. He made an excellent case. It's worth listening to. And they pretty much accepted everything he had to say. The FCC stepped back. They're no longer regulating the internet. Once they step back, they no longer have preemption. And therefore, they did not source the authority for it. Therefore, it's up to local control. That is the key part of this case, and it stands up today. So many city council or city attorneys aren't even aware that this has happened. But this is a big deal. The whole small cell agenda is crumbling before our very eyes. And we're going to get a decision in the August next case orders that came out in 2018. They were argued in February, and they're going to be struck down here in maybe July, maybe August. But at the end of the day, the whole thing is crumbling. And so this is all good for local control. The key problem that we have, Trevor, now is that a lot of people get confused about the Gs, the 5Gs and the 4Gs, and which one is which, and how do we think about it. And so they have a series of questions they've given to us that I think we
first
want to
address what the bioinitiative is.
Sure, I'll go back.
Because FCC wants a target. FCC wants to know what is safe. And they ridiculed, in error, they ridiculed what the bioinitiative have told them. And from our point of view as cities trying to create a safe environment for our kids, we need to know that what is unsafe, which was defined by bioinitiative, so we can make sure that we don't allow deployment of any of these unsafe cells in new locations, and that we try and get the current cells that are turned down so that they're not unsafe. But so you can see there's fatigue. The highest bar in red is fatigue, then headaches, then difficulty in concentration, and then down along this other axis, the red bars are labeled sleep disturbance, feelings of discomfort, depression, etc. And what the height of the bar shows is the prevalence or the amount of dysfunction, the amount of disease reported. Now, going down this way, along this axis here, is the distance from the tower. And it ranges from 0 to 300 meters, 0 to 300 yards from the tower. And the red bars are all at 100 meters or less from the tower, then 200 meters, and then out to 300 meters. And as you can see, as you get away from the towers, the frequency of these measurable disease effects drops. And you'll see that any houses built within 300 meters of a tower, a typical macro tower, as this was, and this was only a 3G tower too, it wasn't even 4G, are a real problem. They were told by the physicians that we can detect, under 1 kilometer, we can detect changes in the health of the community. But FCC admitted this themselves, but the engineers that were doing all this didn't have any idea how important this was. Most of the engineers seem to be in denial anyway that these diseases are real.
All right, so let's talk about it. It's really the problem is that the cell towers are just too close. And when they're too close, we haven't actually figured out what to do with the power. But there are three main variables. We'll get there in the slides, but you have to think about the vertical distance off the ground, the horizontal distance, how far away the antenna is, and then dial in the right amount of power. And what you're really trying to do is you're trying to emulate the kind of signal you'll get from a macro tower that's, 2,500 feet away. Those things are 200 feet in the air, 2,500 feet away, and you start blasting out. Well, by the time it reaches you at 2,500 feet away, it's a very low amount. And so what is it? 0.002. What is that? 5 bars on a cell phone. We're good to go. Can we live with 0.002? We sure can. So how do we get the small cells to do the same? So that then when they come into your bedroom, you're still at 0.002. The only way to do that is to significantly cap the power.
The concept with the
level.
small cells is that a tower is going to be put at the end of your driveway. So that as kids are playing on the front lawn or walking along the street or riding their bikes along the street, they're going to be about 30 feet away from the transmitter in that tower. And the industry says, oh, it's slow power, don't worry about it. Well, let's look at the engineering of that power. If you've got an antenna transmitting 4G with the standard technologies that they're using these days, then it's let's say it's about 3,000 feet away. That's a good spacing for residences from transmitter towers. It takes it down to around the bioinitiative level. So let's say there's a 3,000 feet spacing. And yet you're cutting that 3,000 feet spacing down to just 30 feet. That's 100 to 1 reduction. The problem is that as waves radiate out, they radiate spherically, and the radiation intensity drops off as the square of the distance.
Or increases as the square of the distance decreases.
Well, the radiation intensity
will increase as you get closer.
Yeah, will increase as you get closer by the square of the change in distance.
Right.
So when you change it from being 3,000 feet away to 30 feet away, You're changing it 100 to 1. That means the radiation intensity is changing 10,000 to 1. The distance is the problem. The distance is a problem because of that R squared, and
Right.
because the 4G has been deployed too close to residential areas already.
The bottom line is these poles are close because they were just built to carry electrical lines and telephone lines, right? That's why they're close. They were never designed for a cell tower. And so, you know, this is just way too close for the power levels they're expecting. Think about it this way. If you bought a Wi-Fi router at Best Buy or Costco, all right, you go in there and you say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this one. And you look at the pamphlet and you open up and actually read it, all right? You're going to find a couple of things. Number one, we're going to cap that power. We're not going to allow it to have any more than a certain amount because we have these issues that we have to regulate. Number one, we can't exceed the guideline. We got to make sure it's low enough in a home environment. You can't exceed the guideline. All right, what's the other one? Oh, we can't have you interfere with other things that are out there maybe 100 feet away, like your neighbor 100 feet away. All right, cool. So we cap it at what? 0.1 watt of output, effective radiated power output. We'll tell you what that definition is in a second. Okay, that's right in the FCC rule. It's right in the pamphlet. All right, so this little guy is here. Oh, you get another thing in that pamphlet. It tells you this. You know, you bought this thing, you put in your house, that's cool, but you can't put it outside. It's illegal. Don't do it. Don't put it in your backyard. Why? Well, it will interfere with stuff that's outside. Oh. All right, let's do this thought experiment. Let's take one of these wireless routers with a 4-inch antenna and carry it out to the pole and stick it on top of the pole, and take one of those power supplies the size of your hand, you know, one of those little guys, and plug it in and ask ourselves, what will that do? That'll go down the block a half a mile. It'll give you 5 bars on a cell phone, and everybody can make a call. 3,000 people simultaneously can make a call. Oh, so that'll do it. That will give you the service coverage you need to get the job done. Well, that's right. So you mean instead of that 28 cubic feet, you know, refrigerator on the sidewalk, we can actually have a power supply the size of our hands? That's right. Do you mean instead of that 4-foot tall antenna that I'm going to show you in a second, you can have a 4-inch antenna? That's right. Oh, so can we pass a local law to make that happen when you come into our neighborhood? That's right. Oh, so we have a solution. Yes, we do. Because we can regulate the operations of cell phone towers. And we are going to finally regulate this industry, just like we had to regulate cars. We used to kill a bunch of people on the highways until we got speed limits and seatbelts and airbags. We got them all in the 60s and 70s. Well, we need that for the wireless industry. But hey, you know what? No effective prohibition of service. Everybody can make a call. If you got a significant gap, we'll let you put one in. But if they just put in a Wi-Fi router size thing with Wi-Fi router power, well, now this is not a disaster. Now we will be getting service, but we won't be wiping people out. That's really the goal. Is it perfect? No. Would you rather have them all turned off? Sure. But I mean, if you had to live with something, I'd much rather live with a Wi-Fi router. Think about it this way. I have to be a good neighbor to my neighbor. I have to, you know, I can only have a Wi-Fi router with just a certain amount of power. I can't have more than that. All right. Well, if I'm 25 to 50 feet from my neighbor, and that pole is 25 to 50 feet from me, well, that pole should be the same kind of neighbor as I am to my neighbor. So let's cap that pole at 0.1 watt. And here's the beauty of it, all right? If you're a city and you look at all these regulations saying you can't charge too much money, only a certain amount of rent, they cap them and cap them and cap. Well, guess what? They didn't regulate the policing fees. Ta-da! I can sit down and say you can only have so much power, and if you exceed that amount of power, then I will fine you. Hey, that's in the FCC regulations. That's cool. We can do that tomorrow. Local law, pass it. How do you police it? Oh, do I hire a guy to go out with a meter and run around? Oh, I don't need to do that. Heck, no. I'll go down to Home Depot and pick up a $5 fuse. I'll put it right on the pole. And I'm only going to let you have that amount of power, no more, because we did the math. You know, we got the right vertical, the right horizontal, and the right power. That's it. That's all you get. Hey, you blow that, now I get to charge you a fee. You blow it a second time, I'll charge you a bigger fee. You blow it a third time, oh, you lost your permit. You're out of here. All right? These are things that any local city can do. And you can make big money. So the question is your city interested in making money? I think they are. And this is a way you do it. You do it by focusing them on.
This is a page from the Bio Initiative color charts. If you go to bioinitiative.org, that one of the items on the left-hand side is color charts. And if you download the color charts, they contain all of the summaries, all of the major studies outlined one by one, and what they are for. And for example, the lowest level, the one that set the unsafe level, is down here on the first page. It was Heinrich in 2010 who found in children and adolescents 8 to 17 years, short-term exposure caused headache, irritation, concentration difficulties in school. So that is the bioinitiative unsafe level. They recommend that it should be 10 times lower than that to give some sort of a margin for errors. And in DBM, as I told the DBM, FCC, that corresponds to minus 37 dBm for the unsafe level, minus 47 dBm. The crazy thing talking about these Wi-Fi routers is that the FCC actually told the DC Circuit Court of Appeals that the small cells that are going to be placed outside residences is exactly the same as a Wi-Fi router, exactly the same level of danger as a Wi-Fi router. The court threw that out and said that's ridiculous.
Look, here's a 4-inch antenna. That's the size of it. It's all you need to actually get it done in your neighborhood. You get a small cell, something that size, you're good to go. You'll have service. This is built to scale. This is a model. This is a 4-foot antenna, Amphenol. It's very, very popular. This is how thick it is. This is how big it is. And that is a macro tower antenna. Do not lie to yourself. That is a macro tower. There is no such thing as a small cell. It is actually, from a power standpoint, a huge macro tower, somewhere between 10 and 30 feet from your house. That's how you have to think about it. So you have to think about it as the amount of power getting into my bedroom. And when you do, you're going to realize the power is 10 million times higher than what you would get from a macro tower 3,000 feet away. That's the reality. So you can't let these lies continue to say it's a small cell. It's not. Don't think about the dimensions. Always
because
think
the
about
telecoms are supposed to have the NEPA exemption in their hands when they come to the council asking for the tower. They never do.
And that's an incomplete application. You can use that every single time.
Yeah, every time you can.
Every time. It's just a gift. Go do it. Go do it. Just make it happen. So listen, we have some more slides if you want to. We can go through some basics of Rfemr. The reason that Trevor is so helpful to us is he actually was the scientist who was in the meeting in Petaluma that we had back in February of 2018, right after we got the veto of the California bill in October of 2017. We set up a meeting with all of our local people, and Harry Lehman was the attorney, and Trevor Marshall was the scientist, and I'm the guy running the slides. But we knew what we were talking about, and they listened, and they went ahead and put in protective ordinance for us even before the bad small cell order came out. And so they said specifically through zoning regulations that we will not be putting small cells in residential zones. They are appropriate only for commercial, industrial, mixed-use zones. But they went further and they said, well, we don't like this liability story. We don't like the fact that if you put them on a light pole, you actually may stick us with a liability. So we're not going to do that. It's not allowed. You can only do it on a regular pole, that's wooden pole. Oh, you want to change that out? Nope, not going to let you change it out. Not going to let you do that. You're going to have to keep that pole where it is. It's got to have to be strong enough. Oh, you want to go closer than 1,500 feet to another pole? Nope, not going to do that either. You want to make it taller? Nope, can't make it taller. You want to hang equipment on it? Nope, can't do that. You can put it in the ground. Anything else? Okay, good. That's what you can do. We don't have any. We don't have any small cell applications. Okay, this is a law that stands up. My town will defend it. And so can everybody do this in a state that does not have an ALEC bill? Well, yes, you can. Hey, if you have a bad ALEC bill, that's not open to you. That's because your state took away some of your local authority. But what can you do there? Ho, let's cap the power. Let's cap the power. That's what we can do. So we didn't take away your permit. We're not keeping you from coming in. But if you want to do it, you got to make the equipment small enough so it has no chance of going higher than 0.1 watt. You can do that in a ALEC state bill territory. Hey, Kathy, how many NEPA complaints are you planning to do out there in Idaho?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
We've got several dozen in right now, and we're trying to get out as many as we can. I mean, we're planning on one for every single tower, several hundred.
That's called resolve. I like that. That's good. They're taking on essentially a city that's out of control, trying to install these everywhere. And we're going to basically put them all on Erica's desk and say, please tell us whether or not this needs an environmental assessment or a finding of no significant impact. Oh no, when you're doing it, here is my 52 PDFs of 300 pages that we're going to ask you to read through so you can give us a reasoned decision-making on this. You jam them with evidence. That's the whole point. That's the strategy. It works. So that's a possibility. Now, when it gets down to talking about the G's, right, you get all kind of confused. Oh, it's all 5G. Well, no, it's not all 5G. Oh, I'm worried about 5G. No, you're not just worried about 5G. You're worried about wireless telecommunications facilities building close to your home. Doesn't matter what the G. Forget the G's. The G's are just confusing. It's just bad marketing is what it is. Because what they're doing is they're really putting out certain frequencies that each have a different wavelength. And so at the end of the day, does it really matter what it is? No, not really. What matters is how much power am I getting from all the frequencies? Oh yeah, that's what matters. And so when you're sitting there, do I want to restrict the 5G stuff and not the 4G stuff? No. You want to restrict the power. Let them pick the frequency based on the power. See, now I have to make a choice. I don't have enough power to do all the frequencies. I'm going to have to only do those 4G frequencies because those are the only ones that are going to work with the amount of power you're going to give me. Oh, I can't come in here and do what I want to do, huh? No, this is what you can do. You change the conversation. Let me tell you one other thing. People get really confused about what do you call it, right? There's so many terms for the stuff that goes through the air, right? Oh, we have microwatts per square meter. We got milliwatts per centimeter squared. Oh, we have volts per meter. Oh, we have dBm. Oh, we have effective radiated power. What is this stuff? How do I talk about this stuff? Well, here's the thing to think about. Just try to boil it down to basics. And you can say this to your city council members, okay? What are they doing? They're running factories. That's what they're doing. They're installing factories throughout our neighborhoods. And what are they making? Well, they're taking the raw materials. One is fiber optic data coming through a line, beautifully efficient, wonderful, very reliable, very inert, doesn't affect us. Man, those fiber optic cables are the bomb. So we got all that data coming through the fiber optic cables, and then we stop at the base of the pole. Now we have a different goal. Our goal is to spray it at you. How am I going to do it? Well, I'm going to take a ton of electricity and I'll mush it together with this data. We're going to push it up a pole through some radios and other transformations. We're going to get to the top and we're going to try to spray it at you all day because you might want some at some time. Well, wait a minute, I don't need it when I sleep. Oh, we're still spraying it at you. That's how it all works. And so you ask yourself, is this really what's going on? Why are we doing this? What is this? It is electromagnetic power through the air. Just call it that. That's what it is. Electromagnetic power through the air. Is there any noise involved? Oh, yeah, a lot of it. Is it audible noise? Oh, no, you can't hear it. But is it noise? Oh, yeah, a lot of it. Well, how do I tell? Well, I just pull out my meter. Here, let me see what it sounds like. It goes all over the place, right? It's very erratic. It's very terrible. Hey, your ears can't quite hear it, but what can? Your eyes, your brain, your breasts, your testes. Yeah, they all hear it, and they all react to it. You have a famous line in your presentation, Trevor. It's, what's the brain is not, it's not a tissue to be heated. It's a radio receiver. And that is the truth of the matter, okay? Yeah. You are reacting to it and sending it back out. And that is what we all are.
Yeah, I should spend a second on that. How sensitive is the human body to this radiation? But it's exquisitely sensitive. It's far more sensitive than our meters. Our meters can measure down typically to minus 60, 65 dBm for a
minus 85 dBm is 0.002 microwatts per square meter. I know that much.
Okay. Yeah, so minus 85 dBm is what the 5 bar requirement is in a cell phone. If a cell phone has minus 85 dBm, it will give you a good signal. And if you look at the setup of your cell phone, you can actually see that the cell phone is keeping track of the strength of the incoming signals in terms of RSSI, Received Signal Strength Indicator, and that is measured in dBm. But, so what is the problem? Well, the problem is that the body is so sensitive that to radiation that we can't even measure the sensitivity. The problem is that a reaction inside the body between two molecules, if two proteins merge together, bind together, that is over in a nanosecond. Literally, in less than 10 to the minus 9 second, that's done. The mRNA then could be created within microseconds, and we're looking at our meters waiting for the meter to flick. No, I'm sorry, the body's already been harmed by that and they were able to show that the brains of fruit flies do radiate RF signals created by themselves. They were able to show that and measure it. And it measures, they were able to measure around minus 120 dBm, which is 10,000 times less than 5 bars on the cell phone at minus 85
US
dBm.
Cellular is in Wisconsin and in, I think, Iowa, maybe some of the other Midwest states. And they're advertising their 5G as 600 megahertz. Is that 5G?
Yes.
Okay. My next question.
But you want to know more than that or just that?
Well, you can, yeah, if you can briefly explain so I can give people a chance. I have one more question after that, but sure, go ahead.
Go ahead, give me both questions and I'll do both. Go ahead. Okay,
the other question is not really technical. You mentioned in Alex State, Wisconsin, and maybe even Michigan. There's others who passed the 5G bills. So our municipalities really seem to be preempted by the state 5G bills. But you talked about the Nepa bill, I think you called it. I'm not sure that's the exact term, but Kathy and you talked about stopping or slowing down cell towers using this Nepa review. Could you or Kathy or Doug or someone give us the instructions step by step, because cell towers are going up left and right in rural Wisconsin.
I gave Doug all these instructions on November 19th of 2019. He put it out there as one of his calls to action.
Okay.
2019, and there's a page called Nepa Strategies on scientistsforwiredtech.com. I could show it in a second after we answer your question, but it does have it step by step exactly what to do. It gives you the email address, it gives you Erica's address. You can go ahead and figure it all out. And essentially, it's very simple. You basically just say, hey, there's controversy over this tower, and we looked in the file and there's no evidence of NEPA review. And so we're reporting it to the FCC that they haven't done any NEPA review, and we need you to determine whether or not this requires an environmental assessment. So look, at the end of the day, I'm going to quickly say NEPA is a 3-tier system, okay? The big notebook is called Nepa Analysis, okay? It covers all 3 of these steps. The first step is NEPA review, very minor, not much to it. Second one is environmental assessment. That's a big deal, okay? The third one is an environmental impact statement. We'll never get there. I mean, that is like for big highways and shopping centers and all that stuff. We'll never get there. So we're just bumping between first level, second level. All right, what is the first level? It's really nothing, okay? It is the self-policed letter written by the applicant and put into the file. And that self-policed letter can say anything it wants. Doesn't even have to have any rational logic. It could say pudding is green and I am exempt. And hey, that's NEPA review. That counts. All right. Well, then you come to the table and you say, well, if I don't even see a letter that says pudding is green, you haven't done anything. So therefore, I'm calling you incomplete. Hey, town, you want to play with me? You want to play ball with me and call it incomplete? It'll stop that shot clock. That's a good reason to call it incomplete. All right, you don't want to play ball? All right, fine. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to go to the FCC and report the whole thing. Oh, and by the way, here are all the people that spoke out against the tower. Here's their testimony. Here are the scientific studies that say it's a bad idea. Here's how it's affecting our environment. Just put it all in there because they got to read it. And then it parks on Erica's desk, and then we wait. So that's NEPA review waiting for their determination. Look, if they had their systems together, they could process it and send it back to you and say there's no finding of significant impact. That's called FONSI. And if they do, that means no environmental assessment is needed. And then NEPA sunsets its capability for you. It has already been determined, and that's it. Unless you decide the FCC hasn't done a good enough job. So you do another complaint and you send it back. And you say, hey, this looks like a form letter. It doesn't look like anybody really read the stuff. It doesn't look like there's any reasoned decision-making here. Can you actually communicate for me the reasons why you made this decision? We'll wait for that now. And you just keep doing it. And you keep delaying them. And that's all you want to do. You want to get right in the middle of the building of the grid. Okay? So that's all explained on NEPA strategies. You can read all about it. Hey, is 600 megahertz 5G? Well, yes, it is. How do we know? There was a bill, S.19. And it was passed in 2018. And it lists all the frequencies that they're trying to sell. And certain ones have made it through auction and other ones haven't. The industry knows what a good frequency is. And they already use them. 700 megahertz to 2100 megahertz is the 4G world. And it works great. And they've been using that for years. And they love it. And they keep using it. They make a lot of money off of it. Hey, 600 megahertz is even better than 700 megahertz. Why? Because it's got a big 20-inch wavelength, it penetrates deep inside of buildings, and it carries some data, not as much as the high frequency, but certainly enough. Because what we do is we don't just buy the frequency, we also think about the bandwidth. What? What's bandwidth? Hey, this is a good one. You want to know this one. Bandwidth is the amount of data that they can put on a frequency, right? You're used to just the marketing term for a frequency. Oh, it's 700 megahertz. Oh, it's 1900 megahertz. And you think that's all there is to it. No, that's not it. There's a page on ourtownourchoice.org that's dedicated to spectrum. It will show you all the licenses that are purchased all over the country. And it's a patchwork, okay? I decide to buy licenses in Tulsa and in Wisconsin and in Michigan for these particular frequencies. It's kind of close to 700 megahertz, but I actually own 702.4 down and 696.16 up, okay? And now it's time for me to send a whole bunch of data. Well, maybe I'm only sending you a text message, okay? A text message is like a little fruit fly, okay? It's nothing in data. Just floats down to you, and it's not a big radiation event. It comes to your phone, and there wasn't a lot going on there, okay? That's different than when you ask for a video, okay? That's a lot of data coming to you. And so that's a big radiation event. Can you send it the same way as a fruit fly? No, you can't. So how do they do it? What happens? This is how it works. Imagine I have, my job is to send you data, okay? Your cell phone, you just showed up and you talk to me, the tower, say, hey, I'm over here, I want something. I go, oh, okay, you're over there? Got it. What's my first job? I got to build a road, okay? And so I'm going to say, hey, I'm here. I'm about to build your road. Boom, there's a chunk of data or chunk of energy. And then, okay, we got a connection. That's reliable. I got it. What do you want now? Then you come back and say, I want a piece of text. And then I go, all right, I only have to build you a go path for that. Here's your little piece of text. We're done. Thank you. Oh, no, but what if you said, I want a video? Oh, man, now I got to do a lot more building. What am I going to build? A 2-lane highway? Well, maybe a 2-lane highway will get you a phone call, but probably it's a 3-lane highway for a phone call. Oh, you need some web pages? Yeah, no, that's a 6-lane highway in both directions, kind of like an Autobahn. Okay, so what did you want? You wanted a 4K video streamed to you? Excuse me, while I build 15 Autobahns and push down to you 85 aircraft carriers. That's what's happening when you ask for a video. And so should you be asking for fruit flies coming down the go path? Or should you be asking for aircraft carriers coming down 18 wide Autobahns? Well, this is what's going on. And so they sit there and say, oh, well, wireless broadband, it's just as good as wireline broadband. Really? How much energy does it take for you to send me that 4K video by wireless? About 3 million times more. But hey, it's all about convenience, isn't it? And we're going to pollute everybody while we do it. So, hey, what the heck? Here's the deal. In the law, if you read it, functionally equivalent services is in the 1996 TCA. Read it carefully. You will understand that it does not mean wireline broadband. Functionally equivalent services only applies to wireless services. Great. This is good. You establish that wireline broadband and wireless broadband are not functionally equivalent services. You list all the benefits of fiber optic on this page, and then on the next column, all the problems with wireless on this page, and it's done. You've established it in the public record. You're good to go. And then you wipe out this decision for wireline broadband. Why? Because in October 1st of 2019, they no longer regulate it. The FCC hit themselves with their own dumbstick. And so they got themselves in a pickle. In that ruling, they said, hey, we want to deregulate. We don't want to do anything. We want these companies to do whatever the hell they want. All right. What else did they say? Oh, don't you get in the middle, you states, you bad states. Don't do anything. Well, that's where the judges slapped them. And they said, hey, man, if you're dumb enough to sit on the bench, you're no longer able to.
The telcos are using the name 5G as a marketing ploy. 5G was originally designed for the millimeter microwave bands, the very high frequency microwave bands, where a lot of data can be carried very efficiently. And what 5G refers to is the amount of bandwidth, the amount of data bandwidth that's used. So 4G allows a certain amount of data bandwidth over the wireless frequencies. 5G uses more efficient encoding techniques, software and hardware encoding techniques, to put more signal on that same bandwidth. So the 5G doesn't refer anymore so much to the actual frequency in use. It's a frequency spread, or the bandwidth, the spread spectrum. When it's feeding a lot of data down and using a lot of spectrum, then it's a 5G system. That's generally how the industry talks about it these days.
Right. So the way to think about that is that little string that's going between you and me. And if I send you it just on the string for the text, that's good. If I need to send more data, I have to reach higher and lower in other kinds of frequencies to send data to you at the same time. That's kind of the bandwidth thing, right? It kind of spreads out from what the central frequency is to actually get you more and more and more and more data. That's what's going on. It works on 4G too. Does the same thing.
You need more strings, basically.
Yeah, you need a lot more strings to send you more data. That's it.
Yeah.
What about, I get asked often about the 5G that are not using the millimeter waves. So the same principle, just different. Can you guys speak to that a bit?
Yeah, I can a little bit. Do you want to take it or you want me to take it?
Yeah, I'll take it because it's a quick answer. Yeah, it's the same principle. It's the 5G is just a different way of putting the data onto the signal, onto the frequency, so that you get more data.
Someone is concerned about how we would differentiate the health effects between the millimeter waves and just other forms of 5G. Would there be something you would distinguish? Because I think that's most often why we get the question.
Well, yes, more frequencies are in use. The bandwidth is wider, and the probability that one of them hits a resonant molecule within the body, that one of them affects a particular molecular binding process, is increased as the amount of data is increased. And 5G, as it comes in, will be affecting people more too, because it's using the wider bandwidth. But
so regardless if it's millimeter wave, though, is what they asked. The 5G that's not using the millimeter wave, the 5G that is the millimeter wave worse for you on a physiological level?
Let me try this one. Let me try if I get to the bottom of it, okay? I'll give it back to you. Just give me a second. Okay. Look, what you have to understand is that it isn't just the 5G millimeter frequency, okay? It is the concert of all of them working together, okay? If you sucked 4G out of the system, 5G wouldn't work, okay? So you have to have 4G there. 4G is the always-on surveillance frequency, finding where those 5G antennas are. 5G is pretty much asleep, waiting. Oh, here's some data. Now I'll send it to you, okay? And then it falls asleep again, okay? So you're really getting it from 4G much more every day than you are the once-in-a-while 5G, okay? So now you sit down and go, oh, well, what kind of 5G? Well, I'm 600 megahertz 5G. Do I act like that once in a while 5G? No, I'm just like 4G. I'm coming at you all the time, and I'm giving you data all the time. So, but that's called confusingly 5G. And this high millimeter wave stuff's also 5G. Yeah, but I operate differently. I kind of hold back and wait until I get a request, and then I give it to you. Then I give it to you, okay? So at the end of the day, what does it matter whether the higher frequency has some slightly different effect on the lower frequency one? You're getting hit with a whole sandwich all at once with way too much power and an impossibility to predict which frequency is really messing you up. You're obviously being confused by the marketing messages because that's their goal, is to confuse you. Tell you what, let's not talk about the G's anymore. It's unsafe at any G, okay? And so what we're talking about is just way too much power. Let's change the conversation. You have a choice to say microwave radiation or effective radiated power. That's a choice you make. Now, do you have benefits for talking about effective radiated power versus microwave radiation? You do. Huge benefits, huge political and absolutely can win benefits. What are those? The industry has a convention of how it talks about this stuff. I don't know why, it just is, okay? Effective radiated power is when you come up the pole and you have this idea you're about to send the signal out, and you have a certain rating now of how much effective radiated power you can put out of the antenna. It's before it's sent. That's effective radiated power. Then once you send it into 3D space, oh, now we call it microwave radiation, okay? Well, everybody's out there going, oh, I'm getting radiation, don't do it, don't do it. Oh, what's the guideline like? What's happening? And you are on their chessboard and you are playing everything. They got you already figured out. They got case law, they got the FCC guideline, they got ways to slay you. So, hey, guess what? Don't talk about it. Talk about effective radiated power. We don't really care what happens in 3D space, because here's the problem. Once you start asking a question, what is it like out there in 3D space? Well, then the RF engineer comes up and says his favorite answer. It depends. He doesn't have to answer the question. He just says, it depends. It depends on topography. It depends on humidity. It depends on everything there is out there. So I don't really have to answer the question. I just have to go about another 30 seconds and stop talking and smile. Okay, so now we get back to, what does your council member think he can do? Does he think he can do anything medical? No, not really. Does he think he can actually sit down and understand microwave radiation? No, not really. That's a pretty complicated thing. Even these meters have a hard time figuring out, oh my God, I'm out of my league. I better see an expert. Hold on, back up. We're not talking about microwave radiation. We're talking about effective radiated power. Why is that also good? Oh, look at that. I multiply two numbers together, 2. And I get effective radiated power. I can do 3rd grade math. Can you do 3rd grade math? Well, of course you can. I take the maximum input power times antenna gain, and that is the capability coming out of that channel. Got it. Are there any other channels here? Oh, yep, 4 more channels. Cool. What's the spec sheet tell me? Oh, this much power and this much gain. 1, A times B equals C. Add it all up. Boom. I have the answer. That's the capability of the antenna. And look at that, 54,000 watts of effective radiated power right outside my house. How does that compare to 0.1 watt? Well, it's way too much. Take that antenna out of here and bring me back a 4-inch antenna. This is what we want. Now we're talking. And I did this by 3rd grade math. That RF guy, we don't even talk to him. We're not talking about radio frequency microwave radiation. We're not even talking about it. We're talking about getting the effective radiated power down to something we can live with. Because what do we get to protect? The quiet enjoyment of streets. What? Yeah, we do. How about that? Your town can protect the quiet enjoyment of streets. It can say the electromagnetic power in the air is too noisy for quiet enjoyment of streets. It means nothing about microwave radiation. It has no relationship to it at all. You have FCC guideline, put it down. This has none of what we're talking about. We're talking about the quiet enjoyment of streets. That's a police power. I can regulate that.
So can I ask a question based on that now?
Yes.
Okay, so you've identified all these areas that are weaknesses for their arguments on why they're building it, and it's great. But they're going to start knowing these things now that a lot of it's coming onto their desk.
Yeah.
Are we worried about how they can change laws or change things to interfere with this in the future for us?
Yes, we are. And we should be doing one thing right now. We should be sending somebody to Washington, D.C. Doug, you want to go? And we got to make sure that 1699 does not get into the current coronavirus support bill that they should start talking about on Monday. If they actually slip 1699, Senate 1699, it's been sitting there since 2018, game over.
Yeah, I have
we
a couple
all
of
lose.
questions. Thank you. We field a lot of questions from residents in a lot of areas, and one of the things that has come up is a community that a municipality that says, you know, there's a dead spot in this section of town, and we want to help out those people. And you know, we don't want to put up that big eyesore cell tower off, you know, way off out there in some commercial or industrial zone. We're going to bring in these little small cell towers, and we're going to have lots of different carriers come aboard, and it'll be right here, right in the neighborhood, and that'll address your dead spot. So clearly that's overkill, as you just explained. Could you provide a well-tuned answer to that? Because that obviously is not what they need, and what they need is something that is capped and at a distance that could be particularly directed. But I'm not going to try to answer that, posing that to both you, Paul, and to Trevor.
Yeah, Paul, I'll give you a little bit more time to think about it. To me, the thing that immediately pops out is, what is a dead spot?
Yes,
what do they
what's
mean by
spot?
a dead spot?
You got it.
Now, if they mean that they pulled out a cell phone at that location and they couldn't make a call, then there are two things that it could be. It could be, in fact, that there's a dead spot there, but it also could be that the carrier, Verizon, AT&T, whatever, that their computer system just didn't manage to switch between all the various cells serving that area and get one sending to that phone. In other words, because 1 out of 8 phone calls fail from a particular area, doesn't mean it's a dead spot. It means that it is badly provisioned by the carrier. The actual RF at that dead spot, if you use a meter or look at the signal strength being indicated in your cell phone, it shows that the signal is there and it's strong enough, but the network itself is failing. And there's a lot of that that goes on. In fact, Verizon sometimes turns down its service capabilities when people complain, so that brings up a groundswell of complaints from the other residents in the area.
All right, so I got a couple of answers for you here, and it's building right off of that point. Yeah, what is a dead spot? So what do you see here? It's a little table. It's on mystreetmychoice.com, and you'll find it there on the press.html page called Guidelines. You have a Dbm reading, and Dbm, you've heard a couple of times, is kind of a confusing unit. It's a logarithmic unit. So I'm trying to help explain it to you a little bit here. We've talked about minus 85 Dbm. There's your 0.002 microwatts per square meter. There's your 5 bars on a cell phone, okay? The point is that this is not linear. If you go 10 below, it is 1/10, but if I go 20 below, oh, I'm 1/100th. Oh. If I go 30 below, I'm 1/1000th. Oh, that's how it works. Adds an extra 0. If I go up the other way, I'm 10 times higher, 100 times higher, 1,000 times higher. You see, Dbm is a way to have reasonable sounding numbers that have huge differences in power level, okay? So that's the problem, is that people get confused by these units because they're done from an engineering standpoint, not from a normal person standpoint. You're used to thinking that, oh, something that's minus 95 versus minus 75 is 20 away, but it's not. It's 100 times away. That's the way to think about it, okay?
Yeah, Paul actually pointed out in my FCC submission that engineers use Dbm. And if their engineers had been using Dbm when they wrote that submission, they wouldn't have made the errors that they make.
That's
the
exactly
errors,
right.
The errors are there because of the telcos have tried to shift us away from thinking about things rationally. They have spent decades working on the psyche of the councils and the lawyers to try and make it more complex than it really is.
All right, let me tell you this, number two, then. What does your town really need? Your town really needs an accurate assessment every 6 months of what is the dBm signal strength level for every frequency, for every carrier in its streets within its jurisdiction. Can they get that? Oh, sure. The industry does this all the time. And could they order it up every 6 months? Yes, they could. Could they charge it to the wireless industry? Yeah, they could. That's great. So now we don't have to have any funny charts that are fiction by the wires company. Oh, I have a dead spot. Really? Convince me. What data do you have? Oh, we can't show you. It's proprietary data. Screw all that. You order up a drive test every 6 months. You get actual data. You put it in the public record. Everybody can see it. And now when they come forward, you say, how's your signal strength here for phone call frequencies? Oh, look, they're fine here. So you can't really put a tower here. How about over here where you actually have a gap? Because we can see it in your minus 120 dBm in your telephone frequencies. Yeah, we can talk about putting an antenna over here, but we can't really have to be forced to put an antenna here where we're already at minus 40 dBm. In fact, we got a little too much. Why don't we actually dial down the power on these towers? Because we've got a little too much here. See, you can get them to tinker the whole system by hitting the goals that you focus them on. So what do we call it? We call it the Written Evidence Wireless Antenna Need Test in Telecommunications. Every bill needs an acronym. This is the We Want It bill. And why is that good? The bill has both wants and needs. It fills them all. And so it just describes it here in a few paragraphs. This is a need test. You drive around every 6 months, you do the test, put it in the public record, and we will decide whether or not we need an antenna, and we will decide whether or not we can do the placement, construction, modification operations of any tower of any G. We don't care about your marketing terms. We just care about how much power you're putting in our neighborhood, because we get to protect the quiet enjoyment of streets. Cool. And when it's time to pay for it, this is what you do. You take a full inventory of all the antennas operating in your town. You calculate from the antenna specs. What are their capabilities? You see who the piggy guys are. Verizon, you're 62% of the pollution in our town. You're going to pay 62% of the bill. Oh, AT&T, you're 38%. Yep, well, you're going to have to pay 38% of the bill. Because we want to be fair. We want to make sure it's apportioned properly. But it focuses your city's people on, Jesus, that's like 3 million watts of effective radiated power of pollution in our town. Do you think we need any more? You have to fight for this, right? You have to open up minds to make this happen. You can't be thinking inside the box and get this done. But hey, we talked to the San Rafael guy, this whole story, 90 minutes, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks later, 5 denials. All 5. All right, this works. All right, but you got to do it. You got to get in there and talk to these people. Are there tools to explain this to you? Of course, I write whole websites. They're up there for free. You go to scientistforwiretech.com, and Doug doesn't like it because it's too many numbers and it's hard to understand. But guess what? It's all there for you. Read it, understand it, apply it. That's what it takes. If you want to win, you can't depend on somebody else reading your bill. You read your bill. You're going to find stuff that's inconsistent, and you can use that inconsistency to save your town. We're doing it right now. We turned a macro tower, a 16 antenna, 530,000 watt macro tower that slipped through and missed 2 definitions to be called a major wireless facility. Hey, we caught him. We turned it back to a minor wireless facility. We got a local law, no more than 1,500 watts. Thank God. That's 1,500 watts of what? Effective radiated power, my favorite term. You can't go along with the tropes of the 5G marketing things. Hey, here we talk about branding. Let's talk about that. I have a choice of branding. What am I going to say? No 5G. What? Yeah, no 5G. That's who we are. We're the no 5G people. Really? Do you have any room for compromise there? No 5G. Yeah, okay. Do you know how government works? We can't deal with no 5G. What else are you talking about? Oh, we stand for effective regulation of wireless telecommunication facilities. Oh, okay, I can do that. All right, so what do you want to do? See, no 5G is a loser brand. You have to understand. It shuts windows. It shuts down conversations. It's not smart marketing. No 5G. Dumb. Really? Oh, 5G free. Equally dumb. Okay? What do you want to be? My town, my choice. Our town, our choice. unsafe at any G, something other than we stand against everything. You have to be for something. Hey, there's some people for safe technology. That's good. That works. All right, you're going for something. But the no 5G is just you have to overcome that every step of the way. And it's so easy to be put into a box because you're the no 5G people. How is it that you can push them to do something? Okay. And you push them through process. That's the other thing. All right. The key thing that people don't get is you want leverage over these people. How do you get leverage? You put evidence in the public record. Not whining, not complaining, evidence in the public record. That gets you somewhere. You start putting them in a corner. They got nowhere else to go. Hey, how do we get this minor wires facility thing done? We did the research. We got to state level. We figured it all out. We shoved it in the public record. We put everybody in their corner. All right. They don't know what to do now. This is how you win. You have to be on top of them. You have to be smarter and more resilient and have more resolve than they have. And when you do, then they go, it's hard in this town. I'm going to go somewhere else.